Got it? Okay, great. So one of my colleagues, Liz Poster, she gave me a call and she said, have you met this retired general who's come on campus? And I said, no, I have not. Who is this person? And she said, it's Rick Lynch. And I said, Rick Lynch? As of Fort Hood, MCOM? The man who held the purse strings to several programs that I was most interested in. And she said, I don't know. If you know Liz, this is exactly what she would say. So I was really excited to know that Rick had joined us here at UT Arlington. And then out of the blue, I hear from his staff. And how many of you have been with me since the first year? Oh yeah, there's just a okay, there's a handful of us. So Rick, you need to know that this handful of courageous souls we have one joke on our first year. What we had to offer to the community was traditional continuing education, which was belly dancing and basket weaving. I'm not making that up. So when you hear from an extraordinary man who has come to this campus, recruited heavily all over the United States, if not international, to find that he has come here, and then to find out he wants to come and see us, sweet! So I got to meet Rick. He came by, and he told me the truth. He goes, you need to know something. I really don't know who you are. And a lot of people on campus don't really know what you do. And at that moment, I was sort of thrilled, but then also ashamed. And those of you who have been with me since year one of my time here understand what I'm saying. There was a time when we just wanted to survive. Please, good Lord, don't fire us. We're going to make payroll, we swear. Don't notice this too much. And so in the last couple of years, we have, in fact, as a program, come a bit above the radar. And so I knew when Rick Lynch came to see us that, in fact, we needed to start acting like adults. So the first thing that I said to General Lynch was, you sorry dog, I wanted that motorcycle safety contract so bad. And I knew I was going to love him forever because he goes, oh, it's those civilian contracting officers. Wasn't me. and you can hear Don Ziegler laughing because he is our contracting officer. And so I thought, God, this is a guy I really am going to enjoy working with in the future. And so when I talked to my colleagues, Bob Braun and I, and Tom Worley and I have worked with Army Safety Center for a long time, and we told Dr. Brenda Miller, who's a colleague of ours that runs Army Safety Civilian, we said, oh, General Lynch has joined us. She said, ooh. So, without further ado, and probably the most important distinction that this man has, I want to introduce you to the grandfather of new baby, Jason Walker Lynch.
This is way cool. Who's a grandparent? See, I've only been a grandparent for 2 days, but I love it already. It was Sunday morning. We get a call from our son Lucas and his wife Erica, and said, "Hey, we think it's fixing to happen." Everybody knows what fixing to means, right? It's fixing to happen, so we jumped down here because we weren't going to miss the birth of our first grandchild. 15 hours later, they all realized that young JW, whose head, however they measure a baby's head, his head is a 37, a normal baby's head is a 33. They realized at midnight that that big head wasn't going to fit down that small chute. They were going to have to figure out another way to get him out. So JW was born by C-section at 12 minutes after midnight Monday morning. And then, I'm going to tear up here, because this is candidly what's most important. I made the point, there was, at the event, there was myself and my wife, Grandma, Grandpa, there was Erica's mom and dad, and Erica's grandparents there. So the great-granddad was there, a couple granddads were there, I was there. I made it a point early the next morning to get to the hospital early so I could be the first grandpa to hold the baby. So me and JW, we talked about all this, how this is supposed to work. I counseled him for about 30 minutes. About 30 minutes of me explaining to him how this is going to work. And I loved it because, as Bill Weber said, he's a good listener. He didn't have much to say, but he was focused. I did have to counsel him, though, because I had explained to him while he was still in the womb, date time group, I thought he should pop out, and he just ignored me altogether. So we'll have to work through that. But this tickles me to death. Teresa, thanks for having the picture here. I can spend the time allocated talking about my grandson. I don't think that's what you want me to do. How much time do I have?
You have, sir, how much time does the general have?
We've got about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I find that I was a general officer for 10 years, and I found that the longer I was a general, the more I like to hear myself talk. So I just got to be conscious of how much time you've allocated to me. And General Weber can attest to that as well. Teresa asked me to come by and talk about change management. And across the Army, last posting, I was the commander of all the Army installations, 163 installations worldwide, annual budget of $12 billion, 120,000 people was the workforce. And candidly, it was all about change, because I started running all the installations, and when I added the National Guard and the Reserve installations as well, we had about $20 billion a year to deal with. 2 years later, we had $15 billion a year. Now, as General Weber can attest, when you go into the Pentagon, you say millions, nobody really cares. That's budget dust. We call it budget dust. So when you call billions of dollars, you got people's attention. So just think about that. It went from 20 billion to 15 billion, and the Chief of Staff of the Army looked me in the eye and said, Rick, I realize we reduced your budget by 25%, but our expectation is that you continue what we want you to do, which is to provide a quality of life, commensurate with the quality of service for our soldiers and civilians on military installations. So the mission remained the same. The amount of money to do it was significantly reduced. So what did you have to do? You had to modify your ways, right? A guy named Clausewitz, an old dead guy, wrote a book entitled On War, right? We in the military, we all have read On War many times. Candidly, I think Bill attests, we just read the Cliff Notes because it's a dry read. But the Clausewitz says it's about ends, ways, and means, right? So if your ends remains the same, in my world it was quality of life, quality of service, and your means are drastically reduced, you have to modify your ways. You have to change the way you do business. You have to modify your behavior. So I did spend a lot of time over the 2 years I was in charge of the installations, talking to large groups, small groups, leaders, and led about change management. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about it in two aspects. I'm going to talk about it from a perspective of individual change management, how you are as an individual responding to change, and then organizational change management. I'll give you some techniques that we've developed over the years on how to work your way through that. If you'll notice, the podium's there and I'm here because I'm allergic to podiums and PowerPoint slides. So bear with me if I move around some, sir, I apologize. I always have to apologize to the guy working the camera, because I know you'd say, why don't he just stand still? But I can't do that. All right, personal change. How many people here like change? Raise your hand. If you like change, raise your hand. Okay, well, I believe you're lying.
I'm a trainer.
I believe you're lying. The human nature of our business is that you like the way things are generally. You're comfortable the way things are generally. That's why it's called the comfort zone, right? And our basic tendency is, now we like this. This is what we like to do. And as a result of that, I don't want anybody to mess with this because this is what we'd like to do. There was a great book out entitled Who Moved My Cheese? Who has read that book? Right? It's all about individual change management. Who has not read the book? I highly recommend it. It's got cartoons in it, so it makes it for an easy read. And it allows you to figure out, how you deal with change personally, you personally. And there are 4 characters in the book, right? Little people, and their name is Hem and Haw. and mice, and their names are Sniff and Scurry. And in general terms, just to give you the truncated version of the book, you know, Hem and Haw and Sniff and Scurry had been in the maze every day of their life and going to the same place to get their cheese, right? Same place, every day, get up, put on your sneakers, move out, there's the cheese, right? And one day they go there, and guess what? Somebody moved the damn cheese, right? That's the title of the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Get it? Who moved my cheese? And the little people, they were just devastated. They had no idea what to do. The little people were named Hem and Haw, right? And by God, I've been doing this for so long, I'm just going to hope that next day when I come back, the cheese is back. I'm not going to go look for the cheese. I'm not going to change my behavior. I'm just going to sit here and hope that somebody brings the cheese back, Hem and Haw. But the mice said, I'm getting pretty damn hungry, right? This ain't working coming back to the same place all the time. So the two mice were named Sniff and Scurry. What do you think the difference between Sniff and Scurry was? Scurry's a lot like me and Teresa, right? And I say that because I got to tell you, I'm the president of the Teresa Madden Thompson fan club. I just am. Scurry says, by God, I'm going to go find some cheese. I ain't going to think about it. I'm just going to take off, right? I'm going to run into this wall. No, he's not there. And I'm going to take off, go that way. No, it's not there. I'm going to keep working. But I'm going to find that cheese eventually. What do you think Sniff did?
Sniffs it out.
Sniff said, hey, I want to think about this a little bit. I'm going to start smelling. I'm going to smell that cheese out. And then I'm going to take a planned route to where this cheese is. And there it was. You got to ask yourself, are you like Hem and Haw? Or are you like Sniff and Scurry? What do you think happened at the end of the book? Not to give away the book itself, but it is a cartoon book, so it ain't like you're going to go home. I can't wait to get to the end of it. What happened, you think? Well, Hem said, hey, this ain't working for me, so I'm going to have to go looking for this cheese like the two mice did. What do you think Haw did?
Starve.
He sat there and died, right? He just died. He says, I'm going to wait here until the cheese comes back. The cheese never comes back. What do you think the most important piece of furniture in your house is? And when I was the 3 Corps and 4 Dig commander, every Wednesday I talked to the 500 new arrivals to the installation. That great place is so great, so many people. And I'd ask these youngsters that question, what do you think the most important piece of furniture in your house is? And the youngsters, being youngsters, one of them would stand up and would say, General, well, clearly it's my refrigerator, because that's where I keep my beer, right? And another guy would want to argue and say, no, that's not true, General. The bed is the most important, because I spend a lot of time in my bed. I contend that the most important piece of furniture in your house is your mirror, right? It's your mirror. Because when you go home tonight, when you wake up tomorrow and you're thinking about this whole idea of change management, you've got to assess whether you're Hem and Haw or whether you're Sniff and Scurry. Now, Rick Shinseki was the Chief of Staff of the Army, a good friend of Bill's and mine, and he told us all early on, we were going through transformation of the Army, that if you don't like change, you're going to like being irrelevant even less, right? Because that's what happens. And the same in your business. You know, as much as I spend time with Teresa and Lisa and the folks in DED trying to understand precisely what you do, I don't know precisely what you do, but I do know that you're in an environment that requires the ability to change. Because things are changing, the conditions are changing. And as Teresa mentioned to me, if you're going this direction and you've exhausted that route, that source of funding, you got a choice like Hem and Haw. You can just put your hands up and say, okay, that's it. That's as far as we can go. Or you can change. And you can go to another route and look for another source of funding. And candidly, she says that you all do a pretty good job of that. And I commend you for that. But let me give you some thoughts on how you can change individually when it comes to change management. And then more importantly, how organizationally you can change. And I read all the time, and I hope that you do as well. I am now a fan of Kindles, you know, so you can read multiple books simultaneously, you know. And if you get a chance to pick up books about change management, I'd ask that you pick up Who Moved My Cheese, and the next book I'm going to talk about, which is Leading Change. All right, so let's talk about individual approaches to change management. The first thing you have to acknowledge is that change happens, right? Does anybody believe that your current set of circumstances are going to be exactly the same for the way it is for the rest of your life? Because if you believe that, it's just not true. You know, in my particular case, and it's mentioned there in my biography, my dad and mom both worked at the paper factory in Hamilton, Ohio. I mean, we really had no money. They worked shift work, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. I get a kick when Jim Spaniolo stands up and talks about how proud he is that we at UTA have 50% of our students that are first in family to go to college. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school. My dad made it to the 7th grade. He said, that's enough of that. I'm not going anywhere past 7th grade. My mom made it to 11th grade. She decided she wouldn't end the education either. So here I am in high school in Hamilton, Ohio, doing pretty well in school. We had no money. And I literally, as it says in my biography, I went to see Eileen Lowell, my guidance counselor, and I said, where can I go to college if I got no money? And she said, well, they got these things called military academies. And I said, well, how much do they cost? She said, nothing, they pay you to go. Sounded pretty good to me. You know? Sounded pretty good to me. So I signed up, got accepted to West Point on a Monday, Annapolis the very next day, the Naval Academy. I mean, I literally went to West Point because I got the acceptance the day before. The postman truly determined my fate. You know? If he'd have reversed it, who knows where I'd be now. And I went back and told Dad, and I said, I'm going to West Point. He said, boy, what do you do that for? That's the Army. You don't want to do that. My dad, is anybody's parents or grandparents or brothers or sisters yourself serve in the military? So you know a little bit about the military. My dad was a private E1 when he was drafted in the Army in 1945. He was a private E1 when he was kicked out of the Army in 1947. He was the world's worst soldier. He's very proud of that fact that you know, he was supposed to be guarding German prisoners of war in these trains moving around Germany after the war. And he thought it was a good idea just to take his magazine out of his weapon, stick it in his pocket, and go to sleep amongst all the prisoners. His leaders didn't think that was a pretty good idea, so he kept getting promoted and demoted, promoted and demoted. Anyway, he hated the Army. So when I said, Dad, I'm going to go to West Point, he said, boy, what do you do that for? That's the Army. The Army's not for you. I said, I'm going to do it. Change, right? Because I knew I needed to get out of Hamilton, Ohio. And I wanted to try to do something different. So I get to West Point, and has anybody been to West Point or heard about West Point? I mean, this was in 1973, and the place was pretty difficult back then. You know? You get there, as soon as you get there, you get off the bus, and you're supposed to report to the man in the red sash. He's an upperclassman with a red sash on his uniform. And immediately he started yelling at me for no apparent reason, right? I mean, I just got there. I was a pretty nice guy. And he just started yelling at me when I got there, right? And then they said, everywhere you go, you got to run. And then they had these things called dining facilities where you were supposed to be able to eat. It didn't happen, right? Because if you were the plebe, the underclassman, what happened is you went to the dining facility and just got yelled at. I mean, the food was in front of you. Pretty attractive food, but nobody gave you a chance to eat, right? Because they were too busy yelling at you. So after 3 weeks, you finally get a chance to call home. So I called home, and my dad answered the phone. And I said, Dad, you're right. This place sucks. I'm coming home. Pregnant pause. Finally said, where are you going to sleep? You know, started it. By God, you're going to finish it. So there I was. Had no place to go, so I stayed at the academy. It's an example of individual change. Another example of individual change for those who know a little about the military, and Bill Weber and I have a shared experience on this. I was commissioned as an engineer officer when I left the academy. I found out pretty soon that engineer really wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an armor officer, because the armor officers in the Army really run the Army. And I knew pretty quick I didn't want to be a supporting guy. I want to be the supported guy. So after 10 years, I worked to get branch transferred from engineer to armor. And everybody said, don't do that. If you do that, you'll never be a commander at any higher level. You were never a tank platoon leader. So the very idea you think you're going to be a tank platoon commander is ludicrous. Don't do that. But I knew that it was best for me, so I took the route for change. Because change happens. And you got to be attuned to the fact that change happens, and it happens to you individually, and it happens to us all collectively. The next thing you got to think about individually is anticipating change, right? Does changes occur? Like all of a sudden you wake up one day and things are all different? Generally not. Generally if you look out on the horizon, you can get a pretty good sense of whether or not change is fixing to happen. And if you anticipate the change, you'll be more likely to be able to respond. Just like Sniff and Scurry and Hem and Haw. If you think that the cheese is going to move, then you can start thinking about what you're going to do when the cheese does move, and you have to anticipate that change. Absolutely critical. You got to master change. Who here is very comfortable working through the dynamics of individual change? Because I haven't met the person. I'm not. I mean, it goes back to looking in the mirror and trying to figure out how you're going to do this. Just like this, This one, I could anticipate the change. I knew it was going to happen for 9 months ago, because 9 months ago, Lucas and Erica said they were fixing to have a baby, right? I could anticipate the change, but candidly, at 12 minutes after midnight, when he was born, that was all new to me, right? How do you manage that change personally? How do you add that new dimension to your life? Now, if you want to see somebody who's got a real confused look on his face right now about change, managing change, who do you think it is? It's my son, right? It's my son. For those of us who are blessed with children, this is a true statement. There you are, you and your wife, or you and your husband, doing perfectly fine, and you decide that you're going to have a baby, and that seems to be the thing you do. But all the way up to the point of the delivery, nothing really changed, right? But what happened to my son's life at 12 minutes after midnight on Monday morning? Everything changed, right? Everything changed. When our daughter Susan was born, we were at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And we went through all the trials and tribulations of having a birth by C-section as well. We got home, and we were doing great as parents. Until one day, we decided we were going to go visit our friends down the street, right? So we just up and go down the street. And we get to our friend's house, and they look at us and say, well, where's Susan? We had forgotten we had a kid, right? Because things had changed, and we didn't manage that as well as we probably could have, so we both rushed back to the house. She was asleep at the time, so she doesn't know we abandoned her. So a short period of time, we did abandon her. You gotta manage yourself, the change. You gotta change. You gotta enjoy change, right? You gotta like the difference. If you like trying something different, who out here who enjoys change? Once you think that you're a unique individual.
I'm a trainer. I like it.
I'm going to take you with me on all my speaking engagements. Nobody can enjoy change except for this guy. This guy here, he likes it. Oh, that's good. If you enjoy a new challenge, one of the reasons that I came joining UTA and took over this thing called ARI and moved to a thing called UTA and got Bill Weber on board is because I do enjoy the challenge. I enjoy the challenge of trying something new. You got to be ready to change quickly, and then you got to continue to know that another change is going to happen. So I'd ask you to think about that from an individual perspective, whether or not you've indeed got to the point where you embrace change, you anticipate change, you enjoy change, and you're prepared for the next change, you individually. Are all these leaders generally in your group here? These folks?
In their own way.
I'm sorry?
This is our whole staff.
Yeah,
Everyone's
okay.
a leader.
Well, everybody's a leader. That's just the nature of the business. In the late spring, early summer, my book will be published. The book's entitled Adapt or Die, Leadership Principles of American General. I'll make sure you all get copies of it if you're interested, right? But what I talk about that is this whole idea of embracing change as a leader and then leading your organization through difficult times, right? Has anybody read the book That Used to Be Us by Thomas Friedman? Do they read? You have a literate staff?
Some of us are from Oklahoma.
That's no excuse.
I would recommend another book to your professional library. It's entitled That Used to Be Us by a guy named Thomas Friedman. Thomas Friedman wrote The Lexus and the Olive Tree. He wrote a book entitled The World is Flat. And his most recent book's entitled That Used to Be Us. And he compares America the way it used to be, the way it is, and the way it should be, And what do you think the difference is? What do you think the theme is throughout there in terms of the difference? It's leadership. It's leadership, right? And I'm adamantly convinced that if you embrace the idea of leadership, you develop effective leaders, you develop leaders who can lead organizations through change, then by golly, the outfit's going to be better, the nation's going to be better, all those kinds of things. So it's all about leading change. So there's a book entitled Leading Change by an individual named John Carter, and I'd recommend that one to you as well. But he says if you're a leader of an organization and they're fixing to go through change, there are 8 stages to the change. And let's just walk through those collectively. The first one, establishing a sense of urgency, right? Why is it important to embrace change, be prepared to change in DED? Why is that important? I mean, why is it important?
Change will happen.
Well, change will happen. You have to accept the fact, anticipate change will happen. But we want to be successful, right? DED wants to be successful. The operations division wants to be successful. UTA wants to be successful, right? So you got to be thinking about how can you embrace this idea of change to give us an opportunity to be more successful. So you have to establish a sense of urgency. How do you do that if you're a leader? How do you do that? Do you go to your individuals that work with you, your colleagues, your peers, and say, if you don't change, you're fired?
No.
Is that a technique that you could use, right? Is it an effective technique? No, of course not, because the individual doesn't embrace the change. He's going to resist the change every time he turns around. He's going to find a reason not to do what you want him to do. It's that important. But you have to establish a sense of urgency. In our world, just to give you a sense of our world, when the president brought me up for the interview process, he said, hey, there's this thing called the Automation and Robotics Research Institute. It's been in existence for 25 years. And the best year it ever had in terms of research revenue was $900,000. We thought it was going to do much better than that. So Rick, why don't you come up, take over this institute, and let me give you a goal, right? The goal that UTA has is $100 million a year, research, right, in the next 5 years, right? I believe that it can be done, and I believe that that goal gives us an identified sense of urgency, a requirement to say, okay, we can't keep talking about this. Now, in general terms, what I find at a university, and all my peers, the retired 3- and 4-star generals, upon retirement, they had a uniform position about going to work at a university. What do you think that position was? Don't do it, right? Don't do it, because the institutional inertia, the resistance to change in a university, the idea of tenured faculty, we don't do that, because there's going to be a real resistance to change. So we now have identified goal, $100 million, we've got identified timeline, 5 years, and as a result of that, we've got a sense of urgency out of UTA to make this happen. How do you be successful? If you're a leader of an outfit, how do you be successful? I think there's 4 criteria. But the most important criteria is surround yourself by competent subordinates and delegate. Right? Leaders that are unsuccessful, candidly, are normally unsuccessful because they tried to do it all themselves. Right? So what do you think I do? I got this role, I got this mission, $100 million a year. I'm out here all by myself, feeling kind of alone out here. So what do? Well, you pick up your friend, the phone, right? And you call your buddy and say, hey, Bill. Now, we've known each other for 30 years. We played softball together. He was an adequate second baseman. I was an amazing left fielder. My recollection.
Highly modest as well.
My recollection. So you get the right people on your team, and you work through this sense of urgency. You got to create, number 2, you got to create the guiding coalition for change. In the world of DED and the operations division, who would be that guiding coalition? It's your peers, it's your colleagues. In our case, it's reaching out to UTA. One of the things that I did right away with Teresa is try to figure out how we can have this partnership between DED and UTA so we both accomplish our goals. But what you can't do is you can't think you're going to do it all yourself. That's, when I give this class on how to be a successful leader, surround yourself by competent subordinates. Delegate, number 1. Look down, not up, which is one thing that Teresa does very, very well. In the military, we say, if you take care of your subordinates, they'll take care of you. It's a true statement. Look down, not up. The third one is don't compete with your sister units. You know, if I thought that UTA and DED were in competition, our relationship would be much less fruitful. I don't think that we're in competition. I think together we're trying to allow this university to achieve its goals. So you got to establish a guiding coalition. You got to develop a vision and a strategy. Bill Weber and I in the United States Army, we spent a lot of time as a strategic leader developing strategic plans based on visions and strategy. You know, and as soon as we took over UTA, we built the first version of our strategic plan. After 6 months, right now, we're revising that and make it version 2 of the strategic plan, and on and on and on. But if you're going to lead change in an organization, you got to have a vision and you got to have a strategy how to accomplish that vision. Right? What is vision without resources?
A dream.
Vision without resources is hallucination. Right? Just think about it. You know, if you're leading change in your organization and you sit there and you pontificate and say, here's what we're going to do in 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it might be, but if you don't go out and garner the resources to make it happen, you just had an hallucination. That's what you did. So you got to be able to focus on having a guiding coalition and develop a strategy and a vision. The next one is a critical piece. You have to be able, as a leader in a change environment, you have to be able to communicate that change vision so that everybody embraces it. Is this the entire DED staff?
You're shy about 45 in Austin that are embedded.
Yeah. See, it's critical to empower subordinates with the vision. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what's going to happen if we accomplish our goals. Here's what's going to happen if we don't accomplish our goals. But to get the subordinates, the colleagues, the peers to buy into it is critical. You've got to generate that team vision. You've got to have a short-term vision. You've got to consolidate gains and produce change. And then you've got to anchor yourself in new approaches. So from an organizational perspective, you know, once you think through whether or not you're an effective change manager from an individual perspective, you got to apply that in a leadership role to allow your organization to improve its ability to accomplish assigned missions. So let me give you a couple of poignant examples from my career as to where this became very important. In 2006, President Bush decided that in order to be able to accomplish established objectives in Iraq, we were going to surge. Everybody remember that? The literature was about the surge, you know, here's what we're going to do with the surge. And as part of that, you know, my division, I commanded 25,000 soldiers in Iraq as part of the surge, but my division was activated early. My division from Fort Stewart, Georgia, was expected to deploy to northern Iraq, and we thought that we had 6 months to prepare for the deployment. And then President Bush announced the surge. And I get a phone call from Ray Odierno, who was the Corps commander in Iraq at the time, who's now the Chief Staff of the Army, and said, hey Rick, remember you thought you had 6 months and you're going to northern Iraq? I said, yes sir, I remember that. That's what we're focused on. He said, well, change the mission. You got 6 weeks and you're going to go to southern Iraq, right? So just think about that. Talk about the complexity of that situation. You know, when division staffs are preparing for combat operations, we got a rigid training program, and in general terms, we think that we got 137 tasks that we have to be proficient at the division level to be able to command and control formation and combat of that magnitude. If you go from 6 months to 6 weeks with your training program, what do you have to do as the leader? You got a choice. You can throw up your hands. Ain't no way. Can't get there from here. Can't go there. You think that was an option? You think anybody came back and said, hey, Rick, if you can't do it, just tell us. It'll be fine. You know, we can wait a while. What do you have to do as a leader? What do you think I had to do? With my key subordinates, I had to sit down and say, okay, of these 137 tasks,
Prioritize.
what are the most important, right? What are the most important of all of this based on our experience? And one of the things about the global war on terrorism is you had opportunities, multiple opportunities to experience the mission. You know, I'd had multiple tours in Iraq and the Balkans by that point in time. So you had a pretty good sense of this is probably the most important task, and this is the second one, and this is the third one. So we used the 6 weeks we had to get ready to go into Iraq, and the most difficult portion of Iraq with the prioritized task list. How many of those 137 tasks do you think we got to before we deployed? Now remember, you're going into harm's way. You're taking America's sons and daughters into combat. You know, it's not like you can go in there and have a bad day and nothing happens. How many do you think we got to? Got to 37. 37 out of the 137. But leaders who could lead change had the vision to say, these are the tasks that are most important, and as a result that we're going to focus on these, and the rest of them we'll work on when we get in theater. Right? That's an example. Here's another example. What do you think war in Iraq and Afghanistan, what do you think it's all about? I mean, you're reading the newspapers. Maybe this group's not reading the newspapers.
Yes, they are.
Listen to radio. Yeah, listen to radio, watching TV, on a website maybe, I don't know. What do you think you got to be able to do if you go into a difficult circumstance like Iraq and Afghanistan? You think it's all about just killing people? Go there and kill a bunch of people? You think you can kill your way out of a counter-church operation? Of course you can. Of course you can. So it really is a combination of getting through the difficult times by killing or capturing bad people, and then focus on capacity building so that the people can become part of the solution, not part of the problem. Does anybody know an Iraqi gentleman or a lady? You do? They're great people. 16 million Iraqis, you know. They want what we want. They want freedom from fear. They want to be able to send their kids to school. They want to be able to go to a clinic. They want to be able to provide for their family. That's what the Iraqi people want, right? This whole idea that national media, you know, I'm the guy that says the national media is a national embarrassment. It really is. I was the spokesman for the force for a year in Iraq. I was the guy trying to tell the story to the American public through the national media. And one day I had a senior editor from one of the major newspapers in my office in Baghdad, and I sat him down and I said, "Sir, I just don't understand." I said, "We're taking your reporters out to see good things and bad things. They're seeing schools being built, they're seeing Iraqi people flourish, and they're seeing secure situations, and all their reflection in your newspapers are bad things. Why is it?" He had the gall to look me in the eye and say, "General, bad news sells newspapers." Which is a national embarrassment. Same with the televised media. You know, we would take camera crews out and see wonderful things. They'd see kids in school. They'd see government flourishing at the local level. They'd see factories working. And I'd get back to my office after having taken that camera crew out and turn on the TV, and what do you think I'd see? The most recent explosion, right? Because they say, if it bleeds, it leads. I mean, I've reached a point now where I don't believe anything I see on TV, candidly, these days. Anyway, the Iraqi people are good people. They want freedom from fear. And that's what we provided them as an opportunity so they could flourish. So in my area, in Bill Weber's area, and other areas out there, what you did is you created a secure environment by killing or capturing the bad people. And then you focused on capacity building. In my area, the primary source of income for the Iraqi people down there, southeast of Baghdad, was fish farming and poultry farming. That's how they had survived to the year, to that point. So we became, at the division headquarters, masters in fish farming and poultry farming, right? Because we were trying to build capacity there and try and allow the Iraqi people to flourish on their own. Now that's pure change management at the highest levels. Here's an organization who was put together, trained and equipped to go kill people, right? Bill Weber and I were talking about that the other day in my office. About that's what we do. You know, I'll tell you this story as an aside. So our daughter Susan is an actress out in Hollywood. Every now and then you'll see her on TV, you just don't know it's her. Not nearly enough to cover the bills, I know, because I cover the rest of the bills. Her fiance is also an actor. So we had gone to Hawaii one time on a family vacation. We included him. He and I were outside smoking cigars and drinking whiskey, which is what I tend to like to do. And he was doing the same thing. And finally, he leaned over to me and says, "General," I like him when he calls me General. We're going to keep it that way. "General, I have a question." I said, "What's your question?" He says, "Well, I love your daughter more than life itself. and with your permission, I'd like to marry your daughter. So I got to thinking about it, just long enough to make him sweat for a while. And finally I said, yeah, David, we love you. You've been around for a long time. They went to college together. They were together for a long time. We love you, and you have my permission. And then I reminded them that I kill people for a living, right? It's important that dads put that in the equation, just so he knows. So you got this group of people that were trained, 25,000 people, that were trained and equipped to kill people, but we were in an environment where killing wasn't going to solve the problem. Capacity building was. So we had to turn to another whole skill set with fish farming and poultry farming and building factories. We had a truck factory in Iskandariyah, Iraq. Bill probably remembers where it was. That for a long time has been a source of revenue for that area, but it had been decapitated from the war, and we had to get that truck factory going again so people had jobs. Right? So that's another example of leading change at the highest levels, to be able to focus your efforts on what's important. So as you're thinking about change, it's really down to that. Ask yourself the hard question. Be honest with yourself tonight, and ask yourself, are you really personally attuned to change management? Are you okay with that? Are you snip and scurry, or are you hem and haw? Where are you personally, right? Because you can't lead change if you can't personally change. That's ipso facto. You can't, right? And then, if you got that right, and you think you can indeed embrace change as an individual, then you can lead from the front for the organization to get them to be able to change as well. Anticipate change, embrace change, wait for the next opportunity to change, and then you'll be amazingly more effective, more vibrant, more flexible, more focused, much like this team is already. So I'll end this with public acknowledgement. I see a lot of things across the university. I just do. I'm not just the executive director of UTA, but I'm also the strategic advisor to the president. So I'm with the president all the time. We're talking about strategic level issues for the university. The bright spot, candidly, on campus is the Division of Enterprise Development. The fact that you all can take the vision that Teresa had and John all had 8 years ago and bring it to the level it is now is nothing short of fantastic. And what Bill Weber and I are trying to do is just learn from you all. Find how you all did that. Figure out how we can partner so we can become as effective as you all. So for all of you, God bless you and thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here and for bringing to us a very relevant, real message that I know is going to add to what we've heard today and really make us think and make us better, and we'll learn from each other. All right? This is just a small token of our appreciation. We really are glad that you were able to be with us today. Thank you.
Well, God bless you all. Thank you for what you did.